Welcome. So today we're going to be using the Poke API to make a Who's That Pokemon game. Let's take a look at the data that we get back from one of these fetch requests. So if I paste that in my console, if we hit this endpoint, we're going to get an array of Pokemon, and we can limit this to the first 150 Pokemon. Because I'll be honest with you, those are the only Pokemon I know. They're from my generation. I wouldn't know any others, so I would fail very miserably at my own game. But if we enter this response, we'll see that we get back an object, and inside of that object, we'll get a results array. And inside here, there's a bunch of objects. There's the name of a Pokemon and the actual URL where we could get more information if we hit this request. But notice that there's the number, so each one of these Pokemon have their original 1 to 150 number label, and we can use this number if we go to another endpoint that we would eventually get. Let me just pull that up for a second. So if we hit this endpoint and pass in the number here, notice we'll get back the image for that Pokemon, and we can change this number to the 70th Pokemon, and we could do it all the way up to the 150. So we can use these images to display in our Who's That Pokemon game. So let's get coding. So if we open up our editor, first thing we're going to do is create an index.html file. And in here, we're just going to have our basic HTML skeleton, our head and our body. And let's see, we're going to have our meta tag. And I'm going to copy and paste a font from Google Fonts just to make this look a little bit nicer. And a link to a style sheet. We'll create a public folder where we can have all of our public assets, because we're going to be creating a local server using VS Code extension. So we'll call this styles.css. And if you don't already have the live server extension, it's this one right here by Ritwick. I guess his name is Ritwick Day. Have that installed already, and after you do that, you should see an option. Let me just stop it in the other one. Actually have to reload this 1 second. You should see an option to go live here. So if you click that, it should open up a new tab, and it should give you a port to where the server is started. So I'm going to open that up manually actually on this monitor so you can see it. Let's give ourselves an h1 tag of hello, just to make sure that this is working. Let's see, there we go. And so as we update our HTML or CSS, that live server should reload for us, and we see our changes in real time, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to make sure that this style sheet is coming in okay. So what I usually do is I just put like a border on the body, solid 3 pixels red, just to make sure. There we go. We got our style sheet running. All right. So let's start fleshing out our HTML skeleton. Then we'll add some styles, and then we'll start making some requests in JavaScript to that Poke API. So first thing we'll do is we'll do a main tag. This will sort of be the center of our content, and then we want a div with an ID of Pokemon container. Where we'll display our Pokemon, and then inside here we need an image to sort of display it first before, actually this should be an image tag, before we actually initiate the game, just some sort of placeholder, and we'll give this an ID of Pokeball. And I have this image of a Pokeball that we could use. Paste this here, close this tag properly. And we look, it's quite large, but we can resize it. So we'll have that Pokeball image, should be Pokeball. And then a separate image tag for the Pokemon that we'll be displaying. So we'll call this one Pokemon image. And this source We won't have anything to display initially, and actually a source that has no tag, like an empty attribute or a hash or like about blank is actually not valid in HTML. So instead, we're going to be using it like a base 64 transparent image. It's ugly. I copied and pasted that from an article, but if we go and we look at inspect it, hover over the source, you could kind of see that white dot right there, and it's a 1 by 1 pixel. It's only 26 bytes. It's a good sort of alternative to use. Once we're going to populate that later, that source will be changed with the image of the Pokemon. But for now, we don't want to display anything just yet, so we'll keep that there. And then we will need another div for sort of the answer to display. So we'll do div ID answer. Inside here, we'll have two divs, one that will show a background overlay to go on top of our overall background image that we're going to put on the main element, and then a second one where we'll show some text for the correct Pokemon. So we'll add that. And next we're going to need a section for controls for the game. I'll call this controls. And this is going to have a button to start the game. We'll just call this play. And then another ID of choices to display a group of 4 multiple choice buttons that each will have a choice of a Pokemon the user can select. And this HTML will be populated in JavaScript, the inner HTML. So we're going to leave that just like that for now. And take a quick look at how this looks. So far we have the play button, and a bunch of our divs are empty. This should actually be choices. So you know what, let's do some styling now. So I'm going to copy and paste a bunch of styles because nobody wants to watch somebody write CSS, but I will explain what these are doing. So just some initial styles for the body. The main has some positioning, some sizing, and it's going to have this background image, which I found online. And this is not going to be responsive. We just want to learn how to use this Poke API. So sort of just like the static set width image of this background. We see here we have our Pokeball. We'll have to style that, but this is our background that we want to have. And we're going to set an explicit height on the Pokemon container. The answer container is going to be initially display none because we're going to show that after an answer is made. And then that background overlay and text overlay are going to have sort of styles to have a different colored border. And then we're going to use that Bangers font family here for the text overlay. Let's jump to show what that actually is going to look like. So if we go to our HTML, in that answer container, this is actually set to display none. So you see how this background overlay is actually a circle here, and sort of toggle this with the H key to hide it. But initially we have like that question mark baked into the background of this image. So eventually we're going to show the name of the correct Pokemon in this div here. So let's just say it was Pikachu. We want to sort of hide that question mark image. So that's why we have that little like circle, that red circle. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. So those are our styles for the answer container. And again, those are going to be populated once we get data back from the Poke API. We're going to add a couple more styles for the controls. And then any buttons that we're using, we just want to make them look a little bit nicer from what we get with the default. So we'll add some box shadows and some font weight and padding and all that. And there's going to be a bunch of, so we have the play button here. The other answer buttons are going to look similar, but when you click on one of them and if your answer is correct, we want it to turn green, and if your answer is incorrect, we want it to turn red. So we have a couple styles for those. And a little bit more positioning for the play button. And we also have to style that Pokeball. And notice we're going to add a wiggle animation that we're going to define with some keyframes. We'll put these at the bottom of our style sheet. I like to keep the animation keyframes at the bottom of the style sheet just to keep it organized, almost like you're hoisting in JavaScript. So this is going to be the wiggle animation, and with that set, we can look at what we have. So for the Pokeball, I think we initially have this to display. Yes, we have this to visibility hidden at first. So if we uncheck that, there's the Pokeball and there's the wiggle every second or two. And it's almost like the Pokemon that we're about to guess is ready to burst out of that Pokeball. So that's a nice little touch there. Let's see what else we need. We need to make some styles for the Pokemon image. So we will show this later, but essentially the image that we'll get back from the Poke API, it's a URL that we're going to display in this container or this image element here. And again, we only have that transparent image to show at first. But when we do have an image to show, we need to make it a silhouette. So what we'll do is a filter with a brightness of 0. And maybe we could see an example of that here. Maybe we'll just grab one of the images that we saw before. So we could use this image as an example, and we could see what it looks like without that filter applied. And we've also scaled it too, because these images, unfortunately, that we get back from the API are quite small. So we want to scale it 2.5 and the filter to add the brightness. And also we have this fancy little transition as well. Once we reveal, it's sort of that unveiling of the silhouette shadow there. So that's what we have for the styles. Let's see what else we should do next. We should probably add our scripts. So we'll do that at the bottom of the body, just so that all of our HTML is defined and we can query the DOM. So the source here, we're going to do current directory public. This is where we'll put our scripts. We'll have one for actually calling the API. So we'll add that, and then we'll have another script. It sort of acts as our main. We'll just call this index.js. Inside here, we will have the API and the one for the index. Okay, let's just make sure that these scripts are coming in okay. So I'll just put a console.log and go back to our document here. We see hello, great. So next we're going to try to flesh out a little bit of this API call. We're going to put, let's see, we're going to keep this really simple. We're not going to do any like kind of fancy importing or bundling of this code, just because we really just want to explore this API. So first thing I'll do is just create a variable called game data. We could save some of the data we get back from the call in here. I'm going to create a reference to the main element, document.querySelector main. We're going to sort of add some classes, CSS classes, to toggle the different states on that element. We need a reference to the play button, so we'll call this play button, document.querySelector play. This is going to have an event listener on the click event. And the function that we'll call, we'll name it fetch data, that we'll define right now. So fetch data, we'll make this an async function so we can use async await. And inside here, we're going to make another function inside our API. We're going to set window.getPokeData equal to async function. Let's see. This will sort of be our main function to get the data from the API. So first thing we need is that array of Pokemon we get back from that initial 150. We actually have to make that call somewhere. So we'll just call the result of that Pokemon, and we'll call that in get Pokemon. We define that as async function get Pokemon. And inside here will be the fetch request. So we want to get the response from await fetch to that 150 call on the API. Okay. And then we need to get the result. So we'll save the result as Pokemon, and we need the JSON from the response. So first things first, let's just take a look at what we're actually getting back here. Okay. Save that. This has to be called. So what should we name this? What should we name this? Or actually, we're going to set this game data to the result of window.get Pokemon data. Yes, or get Poke data. Okay, let's see what that gives us. So on the button click, we see, let's look at the network panel. Looks like the request went off. One of these, everything's a little enlarged here. But yes, there's our request down here to the limit 151. And we're logging the response. And notice that we need the results property on this response object, because that is the actual array of Pokemon that we're going to be working with. So if we go back, we should return the Pokemon.results. We don't really need the other data. So return Pokemon results. So once we have that, we want to shuffle these. We don't want to make it so predictable that, you know, if we're showing Bulbasaur, for instance, the very next, you know, numbered label Pokemon will be the next answer, so, or one of the responses. So we want to shuffle this. So let's call a variable called random Pokemon. We create another function called shuffle to take in, well, let's call this unshuffled array. So we'll call that, pass in the Pokemon. We want to set a variable called shuffled to unshuffled. On a new line, we'll do map the value. So for every item in the unshuffled array, we want to return, let's do just the value, well, an object, a new object that has the value, but we want to give each of these entries a random sort number, sort property. So we'll do math.random. Okay, so we're getting a new array back that has the value and another property called sort that has a random math.random value on it. And then we can use that property, that new property of sort, to shuffle these. So inside here, this is going to be A, B, going to return A.sort minus B.sort. Okay. So we're just shuffling. We're not shuffling by the, you know, sort of that number value. We're shuffling by a random value that we add to it. And then from there, just to keep things clean, we don't really need this sort on the ultimate array that we're using. So inside here, we can just destructure that value inside, and then return just that value, and then return the shuffled array. Okay, now we should log this to, what is this, random Pokemon. And let's get rid of, do we have another log somewhere? No, I think we've gotten rid of that. So let's go back to our view here. Shuffle is not a function. What do we do? Oh, this should be sort. I'm sorry, this should be sort, not shuffle. Okay. So we're looking at this array. Notice now we're getting different order of Clefable, Poliwhirl, 36, 61, 54. Awesome. So now we're getting back a fully shuffled array. And we're going to have 4 potential Pokemon that you can choose from for who's that Pokemon silhouette. So we need another, let's see, we need another function, I think, to get the choices. So let's call this const Pokemon choices equal to, let's make a function called get for Pokemon, passing in those random Pokemon. And we can define that function down here, get for Pokemon, taking that array, and we will call this, let's see, or sorry, let's do, we just want to return this random Pokemon splice 0 up to 4. Okay, this should be choices. So this should just give us back the first 4 choices in that shuffled array. Pokemon choices. Good, we get 4 choices here. Persian, Snorlax, Ninetales, Hitmonchan. And each time we do that, we should get a different assortment. And it looks like we do. All right. So let's save a variable of first Pokemon. This is array destructuring, so we're saying give me the first item, like sort of the first item here in the array of this Pokemon choices array. It's already shuffled, so whatever we should get back here should be shuffled. Persian, Fearow, awesome. Okay. And we need the image here of this one. So we'll call this const image, get Pokemon image. We'll define this, passing in the first Pokemon. And down at the bottom here, make a function of get Pokemon image. Taking in, let's see, what do we get? Oh, let's make this valid so we can actually see what we're doing here. But that's undefined. Yes, let's go back to the first Pokemon, see what we're getting there. Bellsprout. Okay, so notice the URL property here. I'm gonna see if I can log this here better. So we need to get this number in the part of the URL. So our function now that we're making of let's call this get Pokemon image. We need to extract that. So we're going to be passing in, we can destructure that URL. So we're going to be passing in that object. So first Pokemon is an object, but we can destructure that URL property directly. So that's what we'll do here. Okay. And then we need to create a number regex. So the regex should extract the end here. So the rules for this are going to be, we're going to need a capture group, digits, 1, 2, an unlimited amount, and then notice that it ends with that / as well. So we'll put that in there, and then the ending symbol here. And then return, to create some parentheses for a second, URL.match that number regex. We need to get the capture group here. As a fallback, I'll just put an empty array, and that should be the first, or the index 1 item of the capture group. So let's log get Pokemon image. Let's log the image. We'll log both. We'll log the first Pokemon and the image, just to make sure we did that correctly. All right, we got 130 and 130. Awesome. So with that image, all we need now is that URL that we looked at before to display in the UI. So let's get, let's see that. Oh, actually, that was more the number. So maybe we call this number, get Pokemon number. Okay, update that name. And maybe we'll make another function here called get Pokemon image. Taking in the number there. Okay. So make another function, get Pokemon image. And this should return that URL. I'm going to copy and paste that. Well, we know that this is actually going to take the number from here. So let's add that. And then it should return this string. So we can interpolate the number right there, and that should give us the image, the sprite image of the Pokemon that we want to show. So let's log that. And we'll also log the first Pokemon again, just so we know, just so we have all that data. All right, Kabuto, and if we click this, looks like we're getting Kabuto's image. We'll do that again, Kakuna. We're getting Kakuna's image. Awesome, so now we just need to display this in our UI. So let's return this data as an object, and we want those 4 choices. Remember those 4 choices, that was an array of objects. So we'll do Pokemon choices, and we'll create a separate object called correct that will take the image from here. We'll pass this in, and let's give it, we'll also pass the name. So the first Pokemon dot name there. We'll log this. This is in our game data, so we'll log game data. And we have the Pokemon choices, the correct one, so they should all be in the Pokemon choices array. Jolteon is in there. This is the correct object, and let's look and make sure that's the correct image. It is. So if we look at our app here, we can see we have the object of Pokemon choices with, that's an array, and then the correct one. So in this case, it's always the first one as we specified Diglett, and then we have the image. So now we need to actually display that image in our UI. So we'll jump right back over here. And let's see. We have play button, fetch data. Okay. Inside fetch data, let's call a function called show silhouette. I think that's how you spell it. Okay, and when we create that, so inside here, we need a reference to the image. So if we go back, let's see what we called that. Pokemon image is the name. So we'll create that element reference here, call it Pokemon image. Okay. Pokemon image's source will now be get set to that game data dot image. Okay, let's make sure that's working. Document is not a function. What's that? What's that about? Document.querySelector. Okay. So we don't have the image correct. Let's see, what did we do wrong here? Console.log game data. I think we used the wrong property. Let's see. It's correct. We need game data.correct object image. Okay, so we have, looks like Lapras, we hover over, we already have the silhouette style applied, but if we uncheck that, we see it is revealed as Lapras. Next, we will want to display the choices, all of the choices in that array for our user. So let's do that next. We do have an element called choices somewhere on here. So that's in controls, choices. So let's grab a reference to this element. We'll call it const choices, document.querySelector. Pass that in. After this function, we'll call display choices that will define. Okay. Now we need to generate these choices from the HTML. So let's destructure off of the object, the game data object. We know that there's that Pokemon choices object there. And then we'll create a choices HTML based off of this array. So we'll run a map on here. Map name destructured. And then we will return a button for each choice. We'll also put a data attribute just to make it a little bit easier to grab once the event is made. So we'll call this data.name. Name here, and then the button text itself should be name. And we'll close that button tag. And then this HTML, this is an array, so we need to just join it with the join method with an empty string. And then the choices element that we defined up here, its inner HTML should be set to this result, choices HTML. So let's test that. If we go, hit play. Good, looks like we get a number of choices here. Let's give this a quick style, just to make this look a little bit nicer. So I go to my HTML, or my CSS. Let's put this in here. Choices, we'll just give this a grid so we can display them a little bit nicer. There we go. Okay. So next up, we need a listener on these choices. Now, as we click play and the choices get reloaded, this inner HTML is changing. So we don't want to put event listeners on these individual buttons. We want to sort of do like our own sort of mini event delegation here on the actual choices element. So let's do that now. I think we need a function here to sort of watch for those clicks on those choices buttons. So we'll call this function add answer handler. Side here. We'll call this right off the bat. So place it somewhere. Let's place it here. Make sure some of those are defined already. And let's see, we need on the choices element, we'll add an event listener, a click event listener. And then inside, the event target has that sort of data set property that we put on it. So if we look at that HTML, look at the choices, notice that these buttons have that name attribute that we put on each of these. So we can grab that. We'll call this const name destructured off of the event target data set. Make sure that's working. Good, it's logging the value that we have there. And now we want to make sure we're showing the correct feedback when the button is pressed. So we have created those CSS classes for correct and incorrect by just changing the background color of these. So we could create a ternary here. So const result class is going to equal name. If the name was correct in the data, in our game data, then the class is going to be correct, otherwise incorrect. And then the event target is the actual button, so the class list can be added with that result class. And that should do it. That should give us that red or green feedback. So we know that this is Magnemite. We get the green class. Seeking gets red. Awesome. So we haven't revealed the Pokemon yet. We are getting this feedback that if you clicked on the right answer, it's turning green, but we haven't actually revealed this yet. So let's create a function for that. We'll call that reveal Pokemon. And this should happen probably, let's see. No matter what answer you've chosen, I think it makes sense to reveal it after you've just selected one. And inside this function, we can control that reveal by adding a class to the main element. So we'll do main class list. We're going to add a revealed class. And we also want to populate that little text overlay that we had before to show the correct Pokemon. So I think we're going to need a reference to that. Yeah, so we'll do const text overlay. If we copy this, text content is going to equal our game data correct name, and we'll put a little exclamation point, give it a little bit more emotion. So now we need to add some of these classes that I was saving for now. So I'm going to paste a whole bunch of them. These are all going on the main element. So we're going to have certain classes for fetching. This is when the actual fetch request is happening. And we're going to show that Pokeball while we're waiting for a new image to come back that we can display. And some classes for revealed. So once the revealed class is added to the main element, the Pokemon image is no longer going to have that filter. We're going to see that full color image. And then we're also going to display that answer block. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm actually not sure what Pokemon this is. I think it's Omnimite. Okay, great. So we have the revealed class on the main, which is showing us no filter. Let's look at that class here. So we have to click on the image, no filter, because we're revealed. And then this is also being displayed now as well with display block. Okay, so that is pretty much the core of our game. I think one small improvement we could make here is maybe some sort of audio feedback. And I recently came across a really cool API in Chrome called speech synthesis, which is almost like a text-to-speech type interface. So let's see if we could add that to our application. So underneath reveal Pokemon, let's call a function that we'll name speak answer, and we'll define that right here. So with speak answer, we can create what they call an utterance, and we're going to do new speech. Our autocomplete even has that for us. Speech synthesis utterance is what we want. And what are we speaking here? We're speaking the answer. So game data correct objects name. That's our answer. And one sort of thing that we need to do ahead of time is we need to load some initial settings for the speech synthesis. So I'm going to create another function called load voice. and we'll do window.speech synthesis on. There's an event called onVoicesChanged. I'll explain what we're doing here in a second. Just want to create this code. We'll create a variable called female voice, speech synthesis, get voices, and I know that we're going to want the fourth voice. So we just call this code in our browser, just to see what we're working with here. But we did speech synthesis. It's hard to say. Get voices. That returns an array of all the potential voices that we can use. So there's Microsoft David, Microsoft Mark. These are the EN-US voices. There's some Dutch ones. The one that I want to use is index 4. The US, I believe this is the female version, right? Let's see. Actually, it doesn't even say. It just says Google English. But that's fine. We'll use that one. There's a whole number of these. There's ones in different language, Italian and Korean and so on. But what we need to do, this is something that we need to do first, just because the way that this like setting of the voices works, it's a little asynchronous. It's a little funny, but on voices change, we want to set female voice variable equal to the fourth index item in that array. And then in the utterance, we can set the voice to that female utterance. So we'll do voice equals female voice. And we can change things like the pitch if we want. Pitch is going to be, let's say, 0.9. And just to make that sound a little bit lower, and we could kind of slow down the rate too. So I already played with these. Settings ahead of time, and these seem to just kind of sound. They're okay. I mean, they sound very robotic, but this one I thought was the best I could do with what we were given. So once you have those configuration done, you can just say speech synthesis as speech utterance. I'm getting tongue-tied here. So we'll speak that answer. We have that called already. And now when we click on an answer, that interface is going to speak that answer for us. So we'll test that out. I'm going to pick a wrong answer here. Let's try Charizard. Oh, we got female voice is not defined. Let's see why that is. We didn't specify. It should be window.female voice. Okay, let's do that again.
Jolteon.
Awesome. And then, oh, you know what? We're missing a couple CSS settings here. So I want to go back to my CSS. And we had the revealed. You know what? We're missing something for sort of a fetching class here that we have that property defined. But basically, once the new Pokemon loads in, so we'll show you that should be on the reveal, or rather on the play button. So in that callback here, fetching data, I think we really need to reset. We'll call a function called reset right here. And we'll actually call this reset image. We also need to, I think it'd be good to kind of reset our source back to that transparent image again. And then we can toggle the class list. We'll add the fetching class. And then we'll remove the revealed class. Okay. So if we look at those, fetching makes the Pokeball visible, and it makes the Pokemon image hidden. So this is when we're just hitting the play button and we're waiting for that fetch request to complete, so we get back to choices. Let's see. I don't think we're removing this anywhere yet. Okay, so we need to remove this once the silhouette is shown. So after the fetch has completed, we'll do main, class list, remove fetching. Once we remove the fetching class, the Pokemon image will be visible. And the choices will load again because they're also being hidden once a fetching is taking place. And then we have our classes for revealed. So let's see if this works.
Onyx.
All right, we got Onyx. We'll hit play again.
Ivysaur.
Ivysaur.
Goldeen.
Goldeen.
Omastar.
All right, looks like things are working. And we have that voice. You know what? This is actually not the female voice. So let me see why that is. Okay, we have one issue here. We didn't actually call load voice. And that's why we didn't get the female voice. So we'll add load voice at the top. There we go.
Version.
There's the female voice. All right. Tangela?
Tangela.
So at this point, we actually have two small problems I just want to go back and correct. The first is that we should have an initial class of fetching on the main element, just so we can show that Pokeball at first. So if we do that, go back, we can see the Pokeball is displayed at first, which is what we wanted. And the other problem, I'm not sure if you caught this yet, but the right answer is always the
Execute.
first one. So we need to shuffle these Pokemon choices again. So we already have a function defined to do that. That's our shuffle function that we created. So what we can do here is instead of just passing that raw Pokemon choices, we can shuffle it again. And then if we give it Pokemon choices, let's go back. We know that the correct answer here is Ponyta.
Ponyta.
That voice cracks me up.
Ponyta. Ponyta.
That's great. That's just great. Let's select Ponyta.
Ponyta.
Okay, awesome. And let's see. This one is Pidgeotto.
Pidgeotto.
That's good.
Pidgeotto.
Looks like the choices are properly shuffled now. So that's
Golduck.
great. That's great. And there you go. There is our working Who's That Pokemon game. I think this was a nice, fun little project. I really like working with that Poke API. It gives you really a large amount of data that you could do all kinds of fun stuff with. But I thought this would make a great little game and a great little tutorial. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.